Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is Driftlands The Magic Revival. It's coming to Steam Early Access on November 29th and is developed by Star Drifters, a Polish studio. So Driftlands is expected to be in early access to 6 and 12 months, though honestly I expect it to stay there quite a bit longer from what I've seen so far. Currently available is the single player skirmish mode against AI, 2 of the 4 planned races, and none of the campaigns and none of the multiplayer modes are currently available. What they're saying is that the 2 races are fully implemented and they may be very right on that, but from a gameplay perspective, there are still some major gaps here and there. Before we dive into gameplay though, let's take a look at options, talk PC performance, PC settings, and everything related to that, because the options menu is actually pretty robust, and from a PC performance and overall level of polish, this game is really good. If this was a full release title, barring the missing features, I would accept this options menu as complete. Under gameplay, you have contextual tooltips, autosave times, and Iceland rocking, and this is just a nice little additional aesthetic that doesn't really add anything to gameplay, but does make everything feel a little bit more alive in the world of Driftlands, so it's a nice addition. Video wise, there are presets for view distance, anti-aliasing, shadow quality, post-processing quality, texture quality, and effects quality. It would have been nice to see what exactly this means. It says epic, but does that mean it's MSA times 12 or is it FXAA times 16? Nobody really knows, and that's a bit of a shame. Windowed, full screen, and full screen windowed, always great. Decent range of resolution options for availability, and you have resolution quality scaling, which is basically resolution scaling. You can't overscale resolutions, which is a little annoying, but you can downscale if you feel like you're running at 1080p, but you still want to get that extra little bit of performance. Performance-wise, this game runs absolutely fine. There's no real complaints whatsoever regarding anything of that. It just does exactly what it needs to do, and that is obviously very good. As an options menu in terms of video options, it's lacking some of the details and nuance you'd expect from a AAA title, and even some of the more extensive indies, but it is not the worst at all. A lack of colorblind mode and the like obviously does take it down a few notches, but still very acceptable, especially when you consider it is early access. Controls, most of the game is fully controlled by mouse, but because it is an RTS-like title, it reminds me a lot of Civilizations and other games like that. I would have liked to see way more bindable keys, hotkeys, shortcuts, ways I can select my units, my buildings, group together things, give them quick commands. None of that is available, and I truly hope they add that in early access. As it stands, the rebindable keys are nice, but they don't really add a lot in gameplay itself. Audio-wise, all these extra audio sliders are absolutely fantastic, and I wish more and more games would do this. For anything it lacks in video option details, it makes up for in audio options and then some again. This is fantastic. From active building sounds, environmental sounds volumes, magic volume separation sliders between that and actual combat volume, the amount of customization we have here in terms of granularity is phenomenal, and I truly do enjoy it. The one negative point is that it misses a master volume slider, which is a weird oversight to have here. But all in all, a really solid options menu and some really good sounds overall in the game, especially for an indie title. The amount of quality they've put into visual and audio presentation is truly astoundingly great, especially in early access. No complaints whatsoever. But what we're gonna do is dive into a single player match with the AI. It's been about 20 minutes into the match, so if you've gotten a little bit on Steam, I can show you around a little bit and show you a little bit of the map, world building, and how that all works. So let's go ahead and dive in. So diving into gameplay, there's 3 main components we need to talk about when looking at this game. First, let's talk about the big gimmick of this title. It's these floating massive islands. You can see this big map, and I don't see all the map, that is designed around 150 islands in the large map, 100 islands in the medium map, and 50 islands in the smallest of maps. And each of these islands is floating around above a massive world that you have to interconnect with these various bridges. Now, there's supposed to be multiple bridges that I assume can cascade across multiple different sizes of chasm in between various islands, but for now, we are fairly limited in what we have available in terms of the number of assets around. And each island has a set of resources. So these resources can be things like wood, stone, iron, gems such as diamonds, or gems such as ruby. You see the resource in the top here, as well as mana and gold. So for example, the gold resource is used to, well, make buildings and also pay upkeep for your various workers and employees and everything in between. Mana is used to cast a variety of these spells, either to defend your island, heal your allies, go scout and explore further in the distance, etc. So you have a variety of different reasons why you might be using gold for, well, a variety of different reasons. And most of the time, it's fairly logical. But one of the things that annoys me by far the most is the way scaling works with various different buildings. Because you are so very reliant on the gold production from your various different units, you end up quickly just escalating into making a bunch of cottages to get people to pay taxes, which then generates gold in terms of resource income, and then followed by the fact that you have to make farms to generate food, which then kills off your gold income because they have an upkeep cost, and you have to translate that to these various other buildings you need. So you're never really in a situation where you feel like you have control over your economy, where you can go ahead and scale up that kind of economy in a logical sense. You were just on the cusp of going bankrupt in terms of economic growth. That said, it does provide an interesting way of expanding your territory. So if you take a look at some of these islands, they may have a very small amount of things like coal, like this center island, or they may have a large amount of things like wood or even stone on different islands. And as you mine out of an island, you are going to run out of that resource, forcing you to further expand your empire outward. Now, on your main island, a building may cost you 5 gold per day to upkeep, and then plus whatever it costs to man it using workers. But further islands out may cost you 6 gold, or even as much as 9 gold. So you do have this rising cost to keep expanding your empire. So just going outward and expanding like a madman, just trying to take as much territory as possible and snowballing from there, isn't always the most viable solution. You have to seriously balance that out against leveling up your farms and your buildings to higher levels that don't increase their upkeep, but do have them produce either more resources or have placed more workers or inhabitants or more capacity to generate whatever they're generating, whether it's gold or diamonds or whatever else in between. So this is a really cool idea, and I'm not sure the balance is right, because especially the gold scaling I feel is really tight and not that great. In most areas here, that's a matter of just tweaking some numbers. Overall, it does a fantastic job in getting everything sorted in terms of scaling, and I do truly like that a lot. Now, that said, most of the game, you'll also just be scaling up buildings in most scenarios. And that's also something I'm not always the greatest fan of in terms of what you might be doing in any situation. So one of the big things that you run into when you are dealing with, especially mid to late game, is that you're going to start getting attacked quite heavily and quite often in many cases. And you might just need to start getting more recruits, more soldiers, more people that deal with attacks. Those also need an upkeep. Those also need you to pay into that gold income, which is really going to curb your growth on that end. So depending on the scenarios and situations you find yourself in, it is very easy to just end up, well, not having a chance to do anything much except just wait it out and sit back on your laurels, just sort of hoping resources get generated eventually that you might need. And this really kills the pacing quite a bit. Now that said, pacing here is also my biggest criticism of the title. In the early game, when you just have one island and maybe you're just expanding to your next second island, the pacing seems excessively fast. You'll be building down cottages, you'll be upgrading your castle, you'll be putting out farms, you'll be putting out mining resources for wood and stone and gems and gold and whatever else in between. And then suddenly, you'll get around 2 or 3 extra islands and you will stop any and all growth. You'll just sort of curb stomp it into the ground because you can't. You can't keep scaling up using cottages just to generate more people, to then generate more food, to somewhat keep up with the gold because you're not be getting much more gold than that. To sort of expand on the resource you need. So more and more, you're going to end up having a lot of issues just keeping up with everything, which is a damned shame. And the same applies for your mana and your resources in general. All you're going to end up doing is hanging in there. The same applies for when you get attacked or anything similar to that. Even something as interesting as this Gate of Tear, which allows me to go back and attack someone if I want to, requires a large amount of resources I'm not sure I have. And because there's barbarians in the map, much like Civilizations had barbarians, and there's 3 more players hidden somewhere in this world map I've yet to encounter when I'm already at a quarter of the map here, is a little bit annoying. So most of the time, you're just standing there waiting around until something happens, hoping that you might be able to deal with it somehow, eventually. And that doesn't always provide the nicest experience because you're always just sort of reacting, sort of responding to whatever is going on in the world. It would have been much nicer to just have a chance, a choice in some manner where you can say, okay, I know where my enemy is, I'm going to purposely expand towards my opponent. But even that is prevented in many scenarios. forcing you to wait again on more resources before you can select one of these islands, and maybe just move this island a little bit closer so you can start forming bridges. And again, from an aesthetic standpoint and from an idea standpoint, you build bridge to bridge and you sort of cobble your empire together piece by piece, hoping you find the resource you need on the next island, whether it's rock or stone or iron or whatever else it might be. Sounds great from a perspective of exploration and a perspective of figuring out the world and everything around it. But the reality of the matter is that most of the time it just breeds annoyance because you're waiting. You're waiting until I get this bridge finished, to get this island figured out, until I can then figure out how to get another island moved closer to this area so I can get another bridge settled and then everything in between. And especially later down the line when you need a lot more mana to generate your own islands to bridge those massive gaps because you keep shifting islands around, is going to cause some serious headaches for sure. Now, part of this is game pacing and design. Part of this is intrinsic to the gameplay and the idea this game tries to promote. Slowly expanding, building up your empire, small armies, small individual units, like my 2 flying ravens that I first got knights for, and then I found a beast nest and then tamed the ravens, and then I could create ravens with rubies that I had to mine already, and then use that to get my knights to ride the ravens. And if I level up my raven knights far enough, then I can maybe get them to ride a wild dragon or a wild eagle. And it's these very slow expansions that allow you to do more and more. But because you're not sprint forward with an active threat of an opponent outside of random attacks by random NPCs halfway across the map using magic, it doesn't feel that way at all. You always feel like you're sort of just waiting until something happens and reacting to it. You can't plan ahead in terms of combat because, well, even in a map this size, we already cover a quarter of it, I still don't know where half my opponents are. I still don't know where the barbarians are. And honestly, expanding all the way up here to deal with one barbarian encampment, just so I can steal one treasure, is not worth the resources required to get all the way up there. And that is definitely very annoying. Balance-wise, that's a pretty easy fix. Change some numbers, maybe decrease amount of attacks barbarians do, maybe decrease amount of spawns on the barbarian side, maybe increase the amount of mana generation or lower the cost of certain structures or upkeeps. All of that's just number games. The core idea of the game is really interesting. It takes the idea of a small village or sim builder or stronghold-like title, or even Civilizations-esque game but much smaller in scale, and allows you to focus on slowly, piece by piece, with low resource counts, low unit counts, and precision to detail, control what is going on everywhere. And that is pretty cool. And again, when your resource run out on a certain island, you have to destroy the building and move on to the next island, and hope you have found an island with a resource you need. If not, you can really well end up without a resource you might want to have. And that is a pretty unique and interesting idea. And again, there's even ways to destroy entire islands if you, for example, don't want a certain island because it is desert-based and your empire can't deal with desert because you're dark elves or maybe you're dwarves or whatever, and they're not good with desert or swamp. Then you can either terraform it into something else or fully destroy the island, have a big gap in the flying sky here using spells such as the Ritual Implosion spell, and then get a new island made within your cone of effect. So there is quite a bit you can do here in terms of the islands you're trying to build, and that is fairly fantastic. And again, this island is going to have a random set of resources you might exploit and get to the resource you need. Maybe it's food, maybe it's rock. On top of that, just clearing out a resource doesn't mean that resource disappears. My quarry here that I used to, as a stonemason, get as much stone as I could out of it, only have left 40 stone on this entire island, still is here, still sticks around, it doesn't disappear. I have to spend gold for my hard-earned money to get that to disappear so I can reuse this ground, maybe for new cottages for buildings, or maybe for new farms for food, or maybe I just want to build something else like a mana factory here to mine mana. But across the board, this is a good concept. Piece by piece, you have to expand further outward, incur a higher cost of maintenance and maintainability to then find your opponent and hopefully deal with them with a decisive blow in terms of destruction. Problem, as I said, is the scalability and the maintainability of the balance that often causes headaches where you're mostly struggling just to keep on existing more than you are out there trying to figure out how to defeat your opponent. I do truly hope that during early access they spend a lot of time on making sure this balance is perfect. Moving on from there, let's talk about the visual and audio presentation, because gameplay wise it's an interesting idea, it just needs a bit of balancing work. Visual presentation here is lovely. This is a human and they look like you'd expect humans to look. They're the most boring race generally speaking in any area. But this looks like a medieval village. And every building as it upgrades changes as it goes. The difference between a tier 3 farm and a tier 2 farm is very readily apparent. Like you have a little windmill here and a bale of hay. And here you have a secondary barn. And everything like that is fairly cool. And the same applies for cottages, from tier 2 cottages and tier 1 cottages. It looks different. So there's a lot of attention to detail to every area. The same applies for when you're cutting down forests. I had a massive forest here I used to get lumber, and now all that's left is a little pile of stumps. So the amount of attention to detail, even on the floating islands themselves, as you zoom in there, the little bits of flowing waterfalls off the edge, cascading trees growing out beneath the various different areas of the map, even trees growing downward, because why wouldn't they, is damn unique. And that is really, really cool. From a visual perspective, I really like it. Now, on the animation side of things, it's definitely lacking. And when you zoom in fully, you do notice that the game is 100% an indie title. It doesn't come close to the attention to detail, something like a AAA of Civilizations 6 or Civilizations 5's size does. Nonetheless, for a small indie, the amount of detail here is truly great. And it does fit well, especially with the rickety movement of everything, and so it all shifts together. Not perfect, definitely not, but for a small indie title such as this, it is a amazing amount of detail and amazing amount of variety in visuals in between the humans, the barbarians, the NPC characters are flying around there, and even the different races, while not all yet implemented, are all pretty diverse and look fantastic. Animation quality is the weak point here, and most of the animations of the characters in the game feel very stilted. Now most of the time, you will not see a lot of characters. If you look at a farm, there's no farmers going around, there's no scarecrows moving around, it's all pretty static. And when you look at something like Knight you have available, his animations are generally pretty stilted in terms of the available range of movement they have. And the character models also are obviously not the highest fidelity, so the game does lose some points in that regard. But where it definitely makes up a lot of the points again is in this sheer scale and detail of what it tries to do. Even the overview, when you zoom out fully in a strategic map, you see icons that are clearly represented and you have full control of interaction here. Where mining might happen with a lumberjack, where tree stands are standing. When you have a coal mine that hangs off the edge of a cliff, or iron mines, just sort of scraping it from the surface of the rocky planet's remains below. It just looks great. The audio perspective is again a little bit of a mixed bag. Combat sounds get repetitive really fast, and so does the background audio track and music. While not bad in any way, neither does it really astound or impress with its own detail or effort in what it tries to accomplish. It could have done a lot more, and I'm a bit sad it didn't. Just having extra sounds of a farm, just having farming sounds, or maybe windmill sounds. If you scroll over the barracks or the garrison, would have been nice to see more sound than just the sounds when you click on it, being repetitive and the same sound every time. More variety in sound would have been nice, and I hope they add that during early access. But even now, it fits, it's good, it's just limited, and that's always the balance an indie has to strike, especially in early access. But for a game as polished as this in visual presentation and in overall visual cohesion, as well as overall quality in terms of a lack of bugs, crashes, or issues, those fine-tuned bits of polish that normally in an early access title aren't even the priority, do suddenly come aboard as something that's missing or glaring. So there's a lot of things here that are still not finished. As I said, there's no campaign mode, there's no multiplayer mode, but even in the single player skirmish mode, you're still missing things like the path of progression, where you can upgrade finance reform and change building upkeep, sort of a progression path with upgrades and unlocks. That is an experimental feature for early access, and that barely works. And they say that straight up. And the same applies for something like extra bridges. If you take a look at the different bridges, it says, oh yeah, you need a special bridge, you need a tier 3 castle, which I have, but this one isn't available. It's coming out later in early access. And the same applies for some other stuff as well. I expect more spells, more abilities, more upgrades for various buildings down the line as well as more units and more unlocks for everything you might need, because the game offers quite a bit here that is unique and interesting, allowing you fine-tuned, detailed control over even things like your knights, where you can give them special abilities unlocked through the garrison or the castle or even a marketplace, and artifacts you can find in the world that you can hunt for and gather and give them to your knights to be stronger in the air, fighting either AI or other players eventually in multiplayer mode. But from a pacing perspective, this game puts me to sleep, and that is a damn shame, and I do hope they spend some serious time trying to resolve that particular issue. So overall, Driftlands is an interesting title coming to early access. It takes the take on a sim game or a low-scale city building game to something slightly different and makes it unique in a combination of RTS and Stronghold-esque title, with some definite influence from games like Civilizations. Whether or not they can get the balance down right for smooth transition between early, mid to late game is yet to be seen, but from the way the game looks now, in terms of sheer polish and availability of ideas and the way they execute them in the game, the developers know exactly what they're doing, and all they need is time and your support to get it done. Driftland is coming over on Steam on November 29th, and you can check it out with a link in the description down below if you are so inclined. So thank you for watching, and if you like this video, press that like button down below. And if you didn't like this video, or this dislike button for exactly that purpose, and leave a comment. Tell us what you like to see in these kinds of games. Are there things you're missing in this game as well that you would like to see being added during early access? Let us know down in the comments below. And if you want to support GuyLogicGaming further, there's a link to our Patreon page down below that you can check out as well if you are so inclined. So I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.